Hi guys, I'm Chase Keller from Chase Keller Journalism, and thank you guys so much for tuning in. What we have coming up for this video is a new series. My previous series was on draft rankings, which was just pre-draft content. Then I kind of scattered around for the draft, and now that the season and off-season is officially underway, we're going to get into some off-season business. We are going to power rank all 32 NFL teams from number 32 to number 1, and we're going to see who ends up coming up on top. We're going to start in the back. If you guys can tell by the title of this video, the number 32 team in my power rankings is the Los Angeles Rams. Now, this is a little tough. They just won the Super Bowl a couple years back. Last year was a big setback, especially with the Stafford injury. But even this year, they lost a lot of key pieces, and it just seems like they're going into rebuild mode. So they come out at number 32 on my list. Before we get started, I just want to give a special shout out to that franchise guy. He inspired me to do this series. He does this every single year. So if you guys are interested in his content, go ahead. It is in the description below. But I don't want to keep you guys waiting for too much longer. Let's get into the Los Angeles Rams. So being a number 32 pretty much means you have to be bad. And that's exactly what the Rams are. Now, their offense isn't bad whatsoever. They have a 74.25 rating on offense, which is 23rd best in the league. But from there, it just goes very downhill. You have the defense, which is dead last. Special teams is dead last. Coaching is tied for 8th in the league. But overall, you're coming out at a 71.65, which is dead last in the NFL. For offense, you have 23rd in the league, 10th in the NFC, 3rd in the NFC West, only above the Seattle Seahawks. Of course, defense is last in the NFC and last in the NFC West. Special teams as well. Coaching is tied for 5th in the NFC and 3rd in the NFC West. The 49ers and the Seahawks both had perfect 80 ratings. But the good coaching and the mediocre offense wasn't enough to elevate them up here. And it's primarily due to this potentially being a historically awful defense, and I'll explain about that in a moment. But before we get into that, we're going to start with the offense. So we're going to start here with quarterback, which earned a 79.1 rating, and that's primarily due to the fact that there is age very much present here in this QB room. And if they end up earning the number 1 overall pick for next season, they may as well draft Caleb Williams with that first pick. Now, that would be a big business decision, as you do already have Matthew Stafford on the roster, who last year, him being hurt was a big contributor to the fact that they were so bad last year. But still, Stafford is getting a bit old. He is 35 now, and his lingering elbow injury is a big concern. Stafford's arm is still extremely gifted. We saw that last year. We saw that in his first year with LA, and nonetheless, he's still a very good quarterback. But him getting older is still a big concern. Next year, he'll be 36. If they get that number 1 overall pick, Caleb Williams could be mentored by Matthew Stafford, maybe even for a season. But I would doubt to see that, especially noting after this year, Stafford only has 2 years left on his contract, and he could very well have high trade value. And drafting Stetson Bennett in the 4th round is not going to be that big of a help. I did mock Stetson Bennett to the Rams, actually. Fun fact. I had them being mocked in the 5th round. He ended up going in the 4th. But still, I thought Stetson Bennett to the Rams was still a very good selection. They got that backup quarterback. And yeah, Bennett's a bit old, but he still fits that modern day type of NFL quarterback if you completely exclude his size and frame. He's also a very experienced quarterback who is now the greatest quarterback in Georgia football history. But the issue is he doesn't really replicate Stafford well. He may not develop too good with the Rams. If Caleb Williams comes in next year, that'll be a better situation for Bennett. Those are the only 2 quarterbacks that contributed to this rating. If you want to see how I did them, that is in the description below, but yet they are the 2 quarterbacks that contributed to the rating. Brett Rypien and their new UDFA QB win. Those 2 did not contribute to that rating, but Brett Rypien, I still really enjoyed that signing. He could be QB2. I do see him as QB3. I don't have him too high of an overall, but Stetson Bennett is still a good option at QB2, and Rypien can be that QB2 if needed as well. Moving on to running back. Running back earned a 73.2 rating, which is in that like okay range, that like mediocre range. It's not great, but it's not bad. So it starts with Cam Akers, who I was high on him when he was a prospect. He hasn't absolutely like wowed me yet, especially since he's been dealing with injuries and not playing at some points. Some people noting that he might have some work ethic issues, but nonetheless, he's only in his 4th year. He's still growing. He's a 3-down back for sure. He can be a reliable pass blocker and a pass catcher as well, not just a runner. He saw 38 snaps in the pass block last year and 171 snaps as a receiver last year. He was still there as an option, and he can be that reliable option there as well. And once you get lower down the depth chart, you do have a guy like Zach Evans, who was drafted in the 7th round this year. But I think it was a big steal. I believe I had a 3rd round grade on him. I think he's that immediate running back too. He's got 3-down potential. He's got great explosiveness. He's got great grit as well. And that especially counteracts Akers, who apparently might have work ethic problems. Now you have Zach Evans, who has extreme grit. And yeah, he had commitment issues coming into college. And he was also with both TCU and Ole Miss. And of course, he left TCU and suddenly they make the national championship. That's maybe a little bit of coincidence. Nonetheless, Zach Evans is still a good prospect. He just isn't really a modern day running back. He loses in his shiftiness, and he's more of just a running back. And then not on this depth chart, but his rating is still contributing to the overall rating, is Kyren Williams. I am big on Kyren Williams' potential, especially after last season. He's got 3-down potential if Akers goes down due to injury again. We saw that last year. He definitely came in and was that reliable starter at running back, even though that offense was still pretty atrocious without Stafford. But he is a very atrocious blocker. You might say, oh, you got Zach Evans now. Zach Evans' technique is also not great in the pass block, so that ruins his upside, and that could potentially take away any potential to even throw a halfback in the backfield on passing downs. And then outside of those 3 guys, you have Tyen Evans, who was just drafted, and Ronnie Rivers. Tyen Evans has great potential. I had a 5th round grade on him, and he was a great UDFA pickup. And then I don't know much about Ronnie Rivers. He was an undrafted free agent last year. That's where I had him last year. Those 2 guys could potentially be rotational pieces that could provide solid injury support for guys like Akers, and even potentially if Kyren Williams or Zach Evans goes down as well. So overall, this group gets a 73.1, which, as I mentioned, isn't great, but also isn't bad. Moving on, you have wide receiver, and this is one of 2 positional groups that is very much carried by one guy, but that one guy is an absolute superstar. Of course, you guys know him as Cooper Kupp. Of course, we all know what he can do. He was the best wide receiver in the league just 2 years ago. Last year, he had to deal with an injury for half of the season. Last season, we didn't get to see that. Well, we did get to see that same skill replicated, but we only got to see it for the first half of the year, not the second half. And he just can be extremely reliable all around the field. Especially when you have Stafford, who's aging. He's going to have to probably start to rely on a receiver. His arm talent's going to start to deplete. But now you have Cooper Kupp, who is a perfect, reliable receiver. He can catch 10 to 12 receptions a game with ease. And then you got Van Jefferson, who is basically just a mirror of Allen Robinson, who left to go join the Steelers via trade. I loved him as a prospect coming out of Florida. I had a mid-second round grade on him, but he hasn't wowed me yet, aka why he's a 73, but he's still developing. He's a versatile option. He played some snaps in the slot with Kupp out last year, and his hands could be a problem. Last year he had 1 drop, but the year before I believe he had either 6 or 9, one of the 2, but he dropped too many passes last year, or 2 years ago he dropped too many passes. That could be a massive issue. And then there's Tutu Atwell, which with every team, I'm going to have at least one breakthrough potential player, a guy who I think is going to break through. And it starts here with Tutu Atwell at wide receiver. I absolutely loved him as a prospect. I had a late second round grade on him out of Louisville, which is where he ended up going. He didn't play his rookie year, but last year he didn't really play a lot, but he still showed flashes of greatness last year. He's very speedy. He's got really good deep threat potential, especially if you have Stafford. He may not play as well as you want to intend, But if you add a guy like Caleb Williams next year, or even draft a guy like Drake May, Tutu Atwell's got very high potential to be a reliable deep threat for those guys. And then the rest of the guys, you have Puka Nacua out of BYU, the rookie. I really like this pick out of LA, especially noting that they don't really have good depth at wide receiver. But he's probably going to just be a developmental piece to start his career. Good idea to not have him start this year, especially with Tutu Atwell in there with breakthrough potential. I think you throw him in there, and I think Puka Nacua, at least with the Rams, is probably just going to be a rotational piece, but that's about what a 5th-round talent is going to give you. And then you also got Ben Skoranek. I'm not high on Skoranek at all. He's a big body receiver. His size is always going to give him that breakthrough potential. I just don't want to make that official because, as I said, I'm not too high on Skoranek. But and then there's the other guys who are there. These guys did not contribute to the rating, but they're still worth mentioning. We got Austin Trammell, Lance McCutcheon, and then all your UDFAs, Hudson Smith, Burmeister, and James. These solid target options for an aging Stafford continues on through tight end as well. Tyler Higbee is your tight end 1, but it still comes out to about a 69.85, just below a 70, which is not good, really. That's actually a bad rating for a positional group, but Tyler Higbee is still a reliable option. I just have him all the way down at a 76 because last year he did have a pretty big setback. He was good for the first half. Once Cooper Kupp went down, his reliability was really put to the test, and he was not reliable at all. But we still know what he can do, and he may be a reliable like tight end 1 with the 2nd or maybe even a 3rd option if Kupp is playing. And then there's also Bryson Hopkins. I was high on him as a prospect out of Purdue. I actually had an early 3rd-round grade on him, but he has not really played up to that early 3rd-round grade. But speaking of, he also hasn't really played much at all. He hasn't seen a single season of at least 200 snaps yet, and if he doesn't play much, I'm expecting Hunter Long to potentially break through. He's very solid, a developmental piece, and he was acquired in that Jalen Ramsey trade. I don't have this on the graphic. I just forgot to put it on there, but he has a 59 overall rating, which is basically like that role player, rotational piece kind of guy in the back of on the back of the team. He wasn't going to be used with Miami anyways, but now that he's with LA, he's that tight end 3, potentially tight end 2. He becomes a good rotational piece instead of just a guy who's going to bench warm. So once again, I'm expecting a breakthrough out of him if he does make tight end 2, but I do have him at tight end 3. So I'm not going to give him that official breakthrough potential. And then you also have Davis Allen and Christian Sims. Both are UDFA talents for me. They did not contribute to the overall rating of 69.85, and I don't really know too much about either of them. I did have UDFA grades on both of them as prospects, and I honestly think that a round 5 selection on Davis Allen was useless, noting that he's going to be the tight end 4 in this offense. Moving on, though, you now are on offensive line, and we start with Joseph Noteboom on the left side. I'm going to be honest, again, I'm going to keep referencing the fact that Stafford is aging. He's going to be 35 this year. He's not a great left tackle option, but you're going to use what you can get. I just think offensive line was a big emphasis point for this draft, and the Rams failed to do that. So they had 14 picks. They spent 2 picks on offensive linemen this year, but at least Noteboom is a predominant pass blocking left tackle, and he's better at that. So with that being said, he is going to likely have a bigger role in protecting Stafford. Then you have Steve Avila, who was drafted in the 2nd round, and this was a massive reach, especially when he was the interior O-lineman number 1 in this draft. Yeah, if you wanted a guard, Osiris Torrance was there on the board. If you wanted a center, John Michael Schmitz, Luke Weipler, and Joe Tippmann were all on the board as well. He just gave up too many sacks and too many big losses for TCU last year, but the technique is there, the potential's there, so I understand the selection. I just think there are 4 better selections, so Avila was a massive reach. Moving along the offensive line, you're now on Brian Allen, who is more of that developing center. Last year, he did deal with a couple injuries, which kind of depleted his potential a little bit, but nonetheless, he had a really good year in 2021, and he's still developing, and he has breakthrough potential this year. I'm not calling it official, though, because of the injuries from last year. He just needs to improve with his discipline, but he's also already good at preventing pressures on the inside, so he's already got some of those good traits. Now he just needed to continue to develop into more. And then you got Logan Bruss, who is a 60 overall, starting on the O-line. If McClendon moves to guard, this is where he should play, at right guard. Logan Bruss just is not ready to start. I had a low draft grade on him, which he was a late 4th. He ended up going in the late 3rd. Injury took his entire 2022 season away from him. He tore his ACL and MCL in the same time, and he might not even be prepared or ready to play in 2023. You needed another interior O-lineman selection, and you failed to do that. So I think you should have probably selected 3 or 4 selections to the O-line and not just 2. And the only bright spot on the offensive line is at right tackle with Rob Havenstein. He's 31 years old though, and as I said, you have an aging Stafford. Now you have an aging Havenstein, or Havenstein, however you say his last name. He did step back in 2022, which isn't good, noting that he is aging. So hopefully that doesn't continue, but we know what he can do. He's still very good all around. He can pass block, he can run block, and he's very reliable. And then you also have Warren McClendon, who you can play him on the inside or on the outside. You should still expect him to get some snaps in everywhere next year. See if he can play on the inside or the outside. Maybe he can start a couple of games next year for LA if he ends up working out. He is the best backup offensive lineman on this team. And then you also had Jackson and Shelton. Both of them did contribute to the final scores. You can see Jackson got a 59, Shelton got a 55. And then the rest of the guys are just kind of like rotational pieces. Maybe injury support. We'll see if they even play next year. I'm sure they will get some of them will still get some snaps, but others like Miller or McAllister won't see any time on the field. So that was the offense. As I mentioned, it was the 23rd best offense in the NFL, 10th best in the NFC, 3rd best in the NFC West, ahead of Seattle. Now the problem here is the defense. As I said earlier, it has the potential to be a god-awful defense and a historically bad defense. It's all honestly going to rely on how good Aaron Donald plays, and that's saying something because he is the only exceptional defender, and he's more than exceptional. The second best defender on this defense is Jordan Fuller. We'll get to him in a moment, but we start off here with the edge rushers, which is the worst group in the entire league. So every single positional group got a rating, and the Los Angeles Rams edge rushers came out as the worst overall rating for a positional group. It starts with the fact that Byron Young is the starting edge rusher on this defense, and he's the best edge rusher by a mile here. He's a rookie, and he got drafted in the 3rd round. He shouldn't be the best edge rusher by a mile, but he is. I enjoyed his tape, and he has some pro flaws. He shouldn't be starting immediately for that reason. He's got size concerns. He doesn't really fit a modern frame. He's not powerful either off the edge. He kind of relies on elusive and shifty moves to get to the quarterback. His technique is good though, and he can develop. I just don't think that he should be starting immediately, but he still should be reliable down the road. And then your second best edge rusher is someone who went 7th round. He went in the mid 7th. I had a mid 7th round grade on him, and he's the second best edge rusher on the team. Daniel Hardy here. I had a mid 7th round grade on him. He ended up going in the mid 7th round. Noting that he missed the entire season last year, he may not play. It's not a great idea to start him either, but he's literally your best option at second edge rusher. I don't understand how you could have this many holes on a defense. Hardy isn't great. Byron Young is going to show flaws immediately. This edge rush group is going to be completely god-awful next year. But also noting is they drafted 2 more edge rushers in this draft. They tried to make it better, but you missed on both. Both of them are undrafted talents for me. Mathis made a contribution to the overall rating at a 48 overall as the 4th best edge rusher, but Hampton didn't contribute at all. Even though he was drafted in the 5th round, he didn't contribute. His technique is extremely concerning, and he doesn't really have that pass rush upside like Nolan Smith does. If you've watched my videos before, you know Nolan Smith, to me, I had a good grade on him, even though his technique is bad, only because he's very athletic and he has the athletic and pass rush upside to be a 1st round talent. Hampton does not have that, so His technique is extremely concerning, debatably worse than Nolan Smith's. And then Michael Holt also contributed to this rating, another guy who is probably shouldn't even be on a roster, but he is because it's the Los Angeles Rams. And then outside of that, you have Thomas Van Valkenburg and another UDFA and Jester. Those guys didn't contribute to the rating, but they're still worth noting. I'm expecting to probably, hopefully, put an emphasis on that. The Rams will pick up an edge rusher in free agency and try to improve this group or bring in a veteran to help develop these younger guys. Nonetheless, this group is awful. It is the worst rated positional group out of the entire league, and they also have the second worst positional group in the entire league. But it's not interior defensive line, which we're going to get into right now, simply because they have Aaron Donald. This group still sucks, don't get me wrong. It's not as bad as the edge. They have Aaron Donald on the inside, and clearly that's going to help carry you. Their second best interior defender is a 65, but Aaron Donald comes in at a 95. We all know what Aaron Donald can do. He literally can do everything. He is getting a little old. He will be 32 years old by the start of the season, and he did have a down year in 2022, and that down year was still elite. Aaron Donald is quite possibly the best defender the NFL has ever seen, and for that reason, him having a down year doesn't say much. He's still a 95 overall in my eyes. I know he's probably going to continue to go down year by year from this point on. He also had rumors that he was going to retire this year, but I still see him being an elite defender. He's still quite possibly the best defender in the league, but Aaron Donald is still elite, easily the best interior defender in the entire league. And then it gets worse from there. You have Bobby Brown III, who I liked him as a prospect. He was a mid-third round grade on him. But he's barely played, and when he has played, it's been mediocre. He's a very poor tackler. He's solid with run defense. He's solid with pass rush. He's not exceptional with anything. And noting that his tackling is just terrible, I don't think he should be starting, but you have a 65 overall as your second and third best interior D-line. That's a little bit rough. At least we can say that third one is a rookie, and that rating is likely going to get higher and higher as the years go on, unless you're like Bobby Brown. And that's Kobe Turner, who is very raw. And again, he probably shouldn't start because he's so raw, but he's still the best option here. Kobe Turner is the second of 3 and potentially 4 defenders who will be starting on this defense next year, and that is not good at all. He does have pass rushing potential, and he can literally be a Walmart Aaron Donald. Not in his first year, though, because he's so raw. So I'm just going to say that Kobe Turner shouldn't start, but he is the best available option here. And then the other guys who contributed to this rating, you have Copeland, who just isn't really great at anything, but is kind of just an all-around reliable option. He just isn't great. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit more in depth on Ernest Brown IV. I was very high on him, and I had an early third-round grade. He won the 5th round. He didn't even play in 2021, and he was atrocious in 2022. I wouldn't be surprised if he was back on the practice squad in 2023, but I was really high on Brown, and he just hasn't panned out at all. So that doesn't help you whatsoever. You also have Jonah Williams, and then Murchison, Johnson, and Carter. All 4 of those guys did not contribute to the rating, and they're likely going to be either rotational pieces or be off the roster. So as I mentioned, the interior defensive linemen get a 73.72 overall rating, which is the best on this defense. That's not good. And it gets even worse. As I said, the second worst positional group in the NFL is also with Los Angeles, and that is the Rams linebacker core. Somehow it's not the worst positional group in the NFL. Again, it's behind the Rams edge, and it starts with Ernest Jones, who I think has breakthrough potential. Are we going to see it? I don't think so, but he's possibly got it. But he's just another guy I was really high on. I had an early 3rd round grade on this guy, but he needs to improve heavily in coverage, and he isn't great in run defense. Those are the 2 things I value most in a linebacker, along with blitzing versatility and blitzing upside. But those 2 things that he needs to improve on, I really think are very important to being a good linebacker. And then you have your second best linebacker in Christian Roseboom. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I had no clue who Roseboom was going into looking at these rankings, but he's going to start next year. To put that into perspective, I know a lot about football. I'll say that, like, genuinely. He has played in 10 snaps in 3 seasons, was an undrafted free agent in 2020, and going into his 4th season, he is projected to start for the Rams. But Ernest Jones kind of saves it because your best edge rusher was a 64 overall rookie, and your best linebacker is a 70 overall veteran. But Roseboom starting, just look no further to the Rams' incapability of being able to draft any linebacker with their 14 picks. So you have Woodbay, Square, Smenda Jr., and Anya Labiche? Becci? I'm not sure how you say the last name. They all are UDFAs, and honestly, any of them could start too with how bad this linebacker core is. It gets a 56.55, the second worst positional group in the NFL. Now we get into the secondary, which they run a 3-4. So they're only going to have 4 cornerbacks that contribute to the rating, and it's not looking too hot over here either. 67.63, and the secondary got so much worse. And this was the biggest contributor to the Rams having a big, just absolute skyfall in the power rankings. Their best cornerback on the roster is Kobe Durant. I do think he has very high upside here, and he is going to be the second breakthrough guy who I have going into this year. Of course, I have to play it safe with a 72 overall, but I still think he's going to break through and potentially get into the 80s for next season. He's a reliable ball hawk. He's basically just like Tariq Woolen. Just he's not as fast, but literally Tariq Woolen last year was get the ball and run. That's what Kobe Durant did last year, and that's what he has the potential to develop more into this year. Last year, Durant had 3 interceptions and 2 pick sixes. He just needs to improve on tackling. He just needs to improve on tackling after the catch. He's just a god-awful tackler. He just can't really allow those receptions, but he's a ball hawk, so hopefully he doesn't. And then you have Travius Hodges Tomlinson, who was drafted in the 6th round, but I believe he was a massive steal for LA. I think he's going to be starting as of now. Probably won't start immediately because he was a 6th round selection, and he will likely be stuck in the slot early on in his career, but he still should reveal that outside potential quick. He was one of the best outside corners in college football last year. He won the Jim Thorpe Award. He's really, really good. He just has those size concerns for the NFL and the play strength concerns, even though I think personally he has great play strength, especially for his size. And I really want him to start. I just doubt he does because he was a 6th round pick. Outside of that, though, Darion Kendrick contributed to this rating at a 61 overall. He's literally Hodges Tomlinson. He was a 6th round pick in 2022 out of Georgia, but he wasn't good last year. He was bad in both coverage and run defense, but at least he can tackle after the catch. He allowed 39 catches on 56 targets last year, according to PFF, which that's just god-awful for a cornerback. Again, at least he can tackle after the catch. He just shouldn't be allowing the catches in the first place. So, and then you had Robert Rochelle. He also contributed to the rating. Rochelle is literally opposite of Kendrick. He's okay in coverage. He's okay in run defense. He just sucks at tackling. Then after that, it just is not great. These guys didn't contribute to the overall rating, but the rest of the guys, you have Jolly and a bunch of UDFAs who some of them I haven't even scouted. That's how much I don't know who they are. So overall, the Rams received a 67.63 rating at cornerback. That is bad. But when you're given this defense, it's the 2nd best positional group on this entire defense, and that is not a good rating at all. And it gets worse in the secondary when you get to safety. So you lost Jalen Ramsey at cornerback, and now you've lost Taylor Rapp and Nick Scott at safety. Neither were elite by any means, but you're still losing your 2 of your 3 best safeties, and you didn't really make up for it anyways. It starts with Jordan Fuller, who is the 2nd best defender outside of Aaron Donald on this entire defense at a 73 overall. He was the 2nd best safety going into the offseason. Taylor Rapp, who got picked up by Buffalo. Yes, Taylor Rapp got picked up by Buffalo, and Jordan Fuller was the 2nd best safety on the roster last year. And at least you still have him at safety, I guess. I was high on him as a prospect, and he was developing consistently until he had a hamstring injury last year. That really does set him back, but he's still a 73 overall nonetheless. And then you have Jason Taylor II, who is not the 2nd best safety on the roster. but he's still worth noting because he has starting potential for this defense. I'm sure he's going to strictly stay to a special teams role in his first year, especially noting that he is now the starting kick returner and punt returner on the return team. But as a defender, Taylor is an insanely good ball hawk. He had 6 interceptions at Oklahoma State last year, but his tackle range is a big issue, so he may not be a great tackler at all next year. The second best safety on the roster actually is Russ Yeast. He was a 7th round pick last year, and he is starting this year. That is concerning, and it basically just rounds out the obvious need for defense everywhere on this roster. But he's still an elite run defender nonetheless. His coverage skills and ball skills just need a lot of work. He only played in 113 snaps last year. He allowed 4 receptions and had no pass breakups in those 113 snaps on 5 targets. He still did have 15 tackles though, which is really good for the 113 snaps. That's 7.5% of snaps he's getting a tackle on. But nonetheless, you're a safety. Coverage should be your biggest concern. And when you're not great at coverage, that's going to hit on Russ Yeast's 60 overall rating. Outside of that, though, Quentin Lake contributed to the rating at a 53 overall, and Rashad Torrance II was actually a really good UDFA pickup. I had a 7th round grade on him. He ended up going undrafted, but got picked up here by the Rams. He has potential to be that safety number 4 this year. So that rounds out this atrocious defense. The safeties get a 64.23 overall. That brings the defense, as I said before, to a 62.82 overall, which is easily the worst defense in the entire league. The 31st best defense, which I will not reveal right now team-wise, they had a 68.82. The Rams were 6 points lower than the second worst defense. And to get a grasp on it, the average defense or the median defense was a 74.2, and the Rams got a 62.8, along with the fact that the number 31 team got a 68.8. Atrocious defense, easily the worst in the league, has the potential to be a historically god-awful defense. We'll see what happens, though. You can trust in Aaron Donald, I'm sure, but we'll see what happens. And now I won't hold you guys for too much longer as we head here into special teams and coaching. With special teams, though, the biggest observation is that everyone is a rookie. Everyone is a rookie. Christopher Dunn is where it starts. He's an undrafted talent for me, and there were only 2 kickers with draftable talent, but I also wasn't high on him in terms of the undrafted talent list for special teams players. So he gets a 66 overall. He was a kick heavy with NC State, but he's not really reliable for long field goals. And then for punter, you also have a rookie in Ethan Evans, who also was an undrafted talent with 1 punter being draftable, but he was one of the top undrafted talents on the board. He still gets a 68 overall nonetheless. And he has great upside. He just played with bad competition at Winthrop. And then, as I said earlier, Jason Taylor II is your starting kick returner and your starting punt returner. I love him as a returner. He's elite in college with a great ball security as well. I just love the return upside. So he gets a 70, which is the highest that I give for a special teams rookie. But nonetheless, the fact that everyone here is a rookie easily hits and depletes the rating of the special teams. They get a 68.24, but special teams only contributes to 16% of the 4. Offense is 30%, defense is 26%, special teams is 16%, and here as we get into coaching, it's at a 28. So coaching is the second most important aspect to my final rating, but there are only 3 guys to talk about for coaching. Of course, head coach, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator. Those are the only 3 guys who contributed to the rating. That starts with Sean McVay. McVay is an elite coach. We all know this. But last year, he just brought along pretty big concerns for my rating on him. He did not get an A+. This year, he got an A. It's just last year, the fact that the offense was a disaster without Stafford, McVay couldn't do much about it. I understand that Stafford brought you guys in a really bad quarterback situation. You guys had Bryce Hopkins as your starting QB, and then John Wolford ended up going down later in the year as well. But those guys didn't play well at all. The surround sound wasn't a big help either. The fact that Cooper Kupp ended up getting hurt as well. Van Jefferson didn't help. Atwell was, again, he showed flashes of greatness, but he wasn't played a lot at all. Allen Robinson wasn't a big help either. Without Stafford, that offense was atrocious. So I think that kind of just set a precedent for McVay. He's still an A, but if that offense struggles again this year, if Stafford struggles and that entire offense struggles, that's going to be big for McVay. And then you have an offensive coordinator with Mike LaFleur. I did not like this pickup this year. You had Liam Cohen before he left to go be Kentucky's offensive coordinator and passing game coordinator. I don't understand why he left for that, but he wasn't good either. I wasn't a big fan of him, but LaFleur was not a good replacement for him. If you guys don't know who Mike LaFleur is, he was the Jets offensive coordinator for the last 2 seasons. Yeah, he lasted 2 seasons as the Jets offensive coordinator before getting fired. That's saying something. You were being the offensive coordinator for one of the worst offenses in the entire NFL, let alone you get fired from your job. Now they're picking him up to be the Rams offensive coordinator. I just didn't like the hiring at all. He's also a passing game guy, and Zach Wilson did not develop at all. With Robert Saleh at head coach, you were primarily looking at the offense and overlooking and developing all these players. None of them really turned out as good as we wanted them to be. But a defensive coordinator, it gets a lot better. You have Raheem Morris, who is in his 3rd season at defensive coordinator for Los Angeles. I understood the head coaching talks for him going into this season. Retaining him was massive for this Rams defense, especially noting how bad this defense is. He could help develop all of these undrafted rookies, all these drafted rookies like Byron Young and Travius Hodges-Tomlinson. I just hate how many experienced guys are starting here. Could be setting up Raheem Morris for failure, but if this defense is even mediocre, Morris 100% deserves a head coaching job, and this is absolutely a prove-it year for Raheem Morris. So coaching this year was based on a 0 to 10 scale, 0 being 70 and 10 being 80. The coaching for the Rams came out at a 9 out of 10, being a 79 overall, which easily helped them not be easily the worst team. I'll be completely honest. There are a couple teams here in the back 5 of this list that came close to being the worst team. I rated them in order, and I thought some of these teams were going to end up being the worst team, and then it just kept getting topped, and then we got to the Rams, and the Rams are the worst team in the NFL to me, but there are some close competitors for this. So being a 9 out of 10 for coaching 100% helped them out, and this is the best thing on their roster easily. It's easily the coaching. You have Sean McVay at head coach, and you have Raheem Morris, who might not even be your defensive coordinator next year if he can even lead this defense to be mediocre. I just didn't like the Mike LaFleur hire at all, so that's why you only got a 9 out of 10 and not a 10 out of 10. Of course, they were all put on a rating scale. The head coach made up for 50% of the rating, and the 2 coordinators made up for the other 50%. And then you kind of average out all the grades that the coaches got. As you can see, McVay got an A, LaFleur got a C, and Raheem Morris got an A-. So that all contributed to it getting a 79 rating. So here's where we wrap up the video. The Los Angeles Rams are the worst team in the NFL. I'm going to repeat some of the things I said earlier. The offense is 23rd out of 32 teams in the NFL, 10th best in the NFC, 3rd best in the NFC West. Defense is dead last, special teams is dead last, and coaching is tied for 8th best. There were 7 teams that got perfect 80 out of 80 for coaching. And overall, the Rams earned a 71.65 rating, which 74.25 was 30% of it, 62.82 was 26%. 68.24 was 16, and 79 was 28. That ended up coming out at a 71.65, which is dead last in the NFL. All right, well, I want to thank you guys so much for watching the first episode of this Power Ranking series. If you did enjoy this video, please make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Of course, this is a series. There will be 31 more teams still to be revealed. 31 is coming out this Thursday, so be on the lookout for that. Once again, I'm Chase Keller from Chase Keller Journalism, and thank you guys so much for choosing this channel as your source of sports coverage. I'll see you guys in the next video.